Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar, the ABCs of IEPs. With me tonight is Pam Lindemann from the IEP Advocate. She is the founder of the IEP Advocate, and through personal experience, Pam started her company 12 years ago. Today, her organization is the largest private education advocacy organization in the state of Florida. Pam has personally participated in over 2,500 IEP meetings, consulted with over 4,000 families, and taught advocacy strategies to thousands more. Pam's passion is teaching families how much power they have in the IEP process. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Pam. We're really looking forward to your presentation. Just to keep everyone in mind that we will be doing a second part of this webinar next week at 5 p.m. Wednesday evening. This webinar will be recorded. Next week's webinar will be recorded. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat. Keep in mind we are broadcasting to both YouTube and Facebook simultaneously. So if I respond to something in the chat, it may look weird if you're on one platform and don't see the other part of that chat message. But with that being said, I will give it to, I'm going to give the presentation over to Pam, and I'm going to turn my camera off, and at the end of the presentation I'll come back online and answer everyone's questions. So take it away, Pam.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you to all of you for joining me. We're going to talk about the ABCs of IEPs, and since this is a two-session presentation, I thought I'd start out with more of the basics of IEPs in this presentation, and kind of go into more complicated issues in the second one. But that being said, any questions you have, I'm more than happy to answer. It's really important that your questions are answered so that you can move forward with your situation at your child's school. So based on that, I am Pam Lindemann. I am the IEP Advocate. And the IEP Advocate, we are a team of advocates who help parents get services for children struggling in public schools. We deal with public schools. From time to time, we've helped families with private schools, but really, we are an organization. We help families get services from public schools because an IEP is a public school document. It is not a private school document. So there's our contact information. We do go to meetings. We help qualify families for IEPs. This is my daughter. This is my life-changing moment. This is Catherine, and she has cerebral palsy. She's very involved. She can't do anything on her own except smile and manipulate all the people around her. And so when she was born, I didn't know what it meant to have a child with a disability. And I had a very dear friend who said to me, pulled me aside, and she actually was a speech language pathologist, and I didn't even know what that was. But she had worked in the public school system, and she had an idea of what my life was going to be like. And she said to me, you are the one who's going to have to work hard for her, and no one is going to work harder for your daughter than you. And that really stuck with me. And I just had this intuitive feeling that in order for Catherine to have the best shot at life possible, and particularly education, I was going to have to figure out special education. So I did that. So I've been on all kinds of committees and all kinds of things. I've done hundreds of workshops and all kinds of categories. I've worked for many organizations. I've done a little bit of everything. So I come to you with a wide variety of skills and knowledge and experience in my background. So let's get started. Because of the COVID situation, it's really important that you understand the law has not changed. When it comes to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is also known as IDEA, it is exactly the same today as it was before March 13th, 2020. That's really important that you understand that, because schools are telling parents that their rights have changed. Schools are telling parents things that aren't true about their child's IEP. And some schools are telling parents that they can't have an evaluation. Not true. Some schools are telling parents that they can't provide the services that are on the IEP cannot be provided at home in an online learning environment. Not true. The school district still has the same legal obligation to educate your child based on that IEP. That IEP is still a legal, valid document, and the school district is still accountable for providing the services on that IEP. Now, the federal government has said, there are some situations where providing the service exactly the way it is on the IEP may not be possible because of COVID and because of distance learning and everything like that. But that doesn't let the school district off the hook, and that doesn't mean that they can't provide any of the services. I talk with a lot of parents. I talked to one dad today. His son is in 7th grade, middle school, and has an IEP, and they're doing online learning from home. They're tapped into the school district's online learning program. That child hasn't received any of the services on their IEP. They haven't received, and he's supposed to have direct instruction in reading and math, never received any of that since the beginning of the school year. He's supposed to have help with independent functioning skills, organization, hasn't received any of that. Is supposed to have help with behavior, hasn't received any of that. And so that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. And I just want to give you this information right at the beginning so that you understand moving forward, nothing has changed. I also want to take a minute and talk to you about the difference between a 504 plan and an IEP, because they are different. And my description is going to be a very simple one, but it's very helpful in helping you understand the difference between the two. So, and I created this little story so that you could help remember. Actually, I created it for myself so I could remember the difference years ago. So if we have a child who has, who's a very good swimmer, and he can swim through the water, and he can, turn his head and breathe, and he can move his arms and legs in a rhythmic pattern, and he can glide through the water, he knows how to swim. Well, that student, because he knows how to swim, we don't have to teach him how to swim. We just have to give him an accommodation, let's say a flippers. And the flippers would allow him to swim faster, would allow him to keep up pace with his peers, and even the playing field. That's an accommodation. That's a 504 plan. However, if we have a student who doesn't know how to swim, who, if you throw him into the water, he's going to go under, and throwing him a set of flippers isn't really going to help him, that student needs instruction. He needs a certified swimming instructor to teach him the skill of swimming, okay? That's what an IEP does. An IEP has a service component to it where a professional could be a special education teacher, physical therapist, occupational therapist, a counselor, a licensed mental health counselor, intervenes and teaches the child a skill. The child can still have accommodations just like the 504 plan, but the professional intervenes to teach a skill. And that's one of the most basic fundamental differences between the two documents. Honestly, most of the calls that I get from families who have kids on 504 plans really should have a IEP, really should have an IEP. But it's easier for a school district to give a child a 504 plan. They're fairly easy to qualify for. They're fairly easy to write because it's accommodations, things like extra time for homework, extra time for tests, things like maybe a reduced amount of work that has to be completed, testing in a private environment, preferential seating, things like that. So those are easy things for the school district to provide. An IEP has accommodations, but the services piece is a lot more obligation, causes a lot more obligation on the part of the school district to provide services to your child. IEPs are taken more seriously. IEPs are, I think as a parent, you have a lot more leverage if your child has an IEP than you do with the 504 plan. Your child has a lot more protections. We call them procedural safeguards with an IEP than they do with the 504 plan. Okay, so right now we're just let's go over some basics about how to successfully manage your child's education with an IEP. The most important thing, and particularly right now, is get yourself a notebook. If you haven't done one now, get one. Get a piece of paper. No, don't get a piece of paper. You need a notebook with lots of pages in it. And I want you to think about your child's experience in school now. You have to really document what's going on. It's critically important. In order to get services from the school district, if your child has an IEP, and on that IEP, there are things that the school's supposed to be providing, like I talked about this other family, and they're not getting those services, you need to document that. You really need to document that. And I was just looking, I had a grandmother who's helping to educate her grandson sent me her little, here, I'll show you this, sent me her little summary of her son's education since the beginning of the school year. And she goes week by week. And she did a really great job. So like school psychologist, every week this seventh grader is supposed to receive 30 minutes of counseling with the school psychologist. And the grandmother wrote, every week the school psychologist has been meeting with this young man. Then she goes to speech therapy. Well, the speech therapist has not been meeting with the student, neither has the gym teacher and a couple other things. So she's written it all down, summarized it, and that's what you need to do. You need to write down all the things that are not going well. I mean, I want you to write down the things that are going well, but we tend to remember those. I want you to write the things that are not going well. If your student is having a hard time focusing, and this is whether your student's at home doing online learning or even if they're at school. But it's a lot easier for the teacher to see how your child performs at school. But you want to write down the things that are not going well. If you have to sit next to your child the entire time he's on the computer learning, then you write that down. If your child shuts the computer off after 7 minutes and refuses to have you teach him because you're not the teacher, you're his mother or you're his father, and he goes into his room and shuts the door, then you need to write that down. You need to write down all academic notes and things having to do with behavior. And then after you write them all down, you have to prioritize them, because when you're going into an IEP meeting, and you're going to need an IEP meeting, when you're going into an IEP meeting, you can't, there are times when you just can't discuss everything. There's just maybe so many things to discuss and details to sort out and opinions to get and problems to solve that you can't do all of it. It's really important that you prioritize, that you have a list. So everything, you start with number one. That's the issue that is the most important thing to you. And that's what you want to start with when you're meeting. When you get that one decided and situated and solved, then you go to number two, you work down your list. That way, when the meeting's over, if you haven't been able to go through your entire list, you at least address the things that are the most important to you and your child. So write down the answer to this question. My child would do better in school if. And this is, so if your child's at home and it's distance learning, you write down, my child would do better in school if he had someone who he could talk to every day for 30 minutes to help him organize his day. He would do better if he could have weekly contact with a counselor because he's having a hard time adjusting to online learning and he misses his friends. He would do better if he was able to take paper pencil testing. Maybe your child doesn't do well with a computer, and he would do better if he had paper pencil testing. That is an option, by the way. We've had some schools tell parents that's not an option, and that is not true. And here's the thing. If it's an option at the actual brick and mortar school, if your child is face-to-face, then most likely, most of the time, it's an option that can be done in online learning. So you have to keep a list of these things that your child would do better in school, because when it's time for an IEP meeting, when it's time to get this, put this stuff on the table and hold the district accountable for the IEP, you have to be able to have lists that you can refer to. I always take lists. I always have lists, okay, of the things that you want to get accomplished in that meeting. So this is really important. Maybe your child would do better if he had a squishy seat at home, because he had a squishy seat at school, but he needs a squishy seat at home. During the summertime, I have a client whose son has a walker. He has cerebral palsy, so he has a walker. And part of his IEP was that he used this walker at school, a gait trainer. And the mom asked the district, and the district said no, they weren't going to provide any equipment to parents at home. So, well, I don't think so, because if that student was in school, he would be having a gait trainer. So we wrote a nice persuasive letter to the district saying, you're providing computers to everybody at home. Why can't you provide a gait trainer? And this is a goal on his IEP. Within 24 hours, she got a call, and within 48 hours, she had a gait trainer. I had another student in the Tampa area where she needed a special chair. She had a special chair in the classroom. It worked really well for her with the positioning of her feet and the way she sat at a table. And the parents asked for that chair. And it was an outstanding team in that meeting. And they couldn't move fast enough to get that mother the chair for her daughter. And not only did they say the chair, somebody said, well, since I'm picking up the chair, do you want me to get you a desk too? Because, then the positioning of the chair to the desk is the ideal situation for her. Would you like me to get that for you too? So that's beautiful that when something like that happens. But you need, equipment. Does your child, if your child needs bumpy paper, if your child needs a computer program, if your child needs internet service, whatever it is, write it down, okay? Because you don't know what's possible or not possible until you discuss it. Most people know that the public school system, we all know that the public school system deals with math, reading, and writing. We all get that. But what most of us don't know is that this public school district is responsible for more than just academic skills. They're also responsible for emotional stability. They're responsible for social skills, how a child gets along with his peers. They're responsible for behavior, organization, communication skills. And these are just general categories. But the public school system is responsible for all of these areas. So this is why when some children do really well with grades, okay, they have A's. I'm getting calls from parents whose kids have A's. But the school district is telling them, well, your child won't qualify for an IEP because they have great grades. They have all A's or whatever it is. That's not true, because academics is just one area that the public school district is responsible. If we have a child who's very disorganized, he may qualify for an IEP because of that. If we have a child who's got behavior needs, who's very emotional for whatever reason, he may qualify for an IEP for that piece. So off task, not being able to focus, needing a lot of redirection, that child too may qualify for an IEP. So I want to go over for you so you thoroughly understand all the areas that a school district is responsible for when it comes to teaching children. So don't limit your areas of concern to just academics like math, reading, or written expression. That's important. It absolutely is important. But you want to think, would your child benefit from occupational, physical, and or speech language therapy? Would your child benefit from counseling? Maybe they have a lot of anxiety. Maybe they're having a very difficult time with this with this, COVID thing, and they're having anxiety about school. They can't see their friends, and so that might be an area of need for them where they're struggling. Do they need special accommodations? Something that maybe most children don't need, but your child does. Small group instruction. Okay, you can do small group instruction in online learning, or if your child's in in a brick and mortar face-to-face environment, they can also do small group instruction. So school districts are responsible for all of these areas. Curriculum and learning, and we're going to go over these in detail. Independent functioning, communication, social emotional behavior, and healthcare. So, curriculum and learning addresses services provided to the student in the areas of curriculum, which is really is math, reading, and writing, instructional strategies, and learning environment. So, anything having to do with academics, any subject areas, the IEP can address those concerns. Social emotional behavior. The IEP can address services provided to support the social and emotional needs of students with exceptionalities, including behavior management, social skills development, and socialization. This is a big category. So children who have anxiety, who have a hard time getting up to go to school, unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of children who get to middle school or high school and severe anxiety sets in, and they've been really like model students, have had great grades and have done incredibly well, but they get, I don't know what happens in middle or high school, and all of a sudden this intense anxiety sets in. And I've had children who can't get up in the morning, who can't get to school until before 11 o'clock. So that's a sign that there's some kind of a problem. And that may be something that the school can intervene with. We're looking at behavior management. So let me tell you my take on behavior. Behavior to me is a spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum, we have very violent behavior. Kids scream, they break things, they they lash out at other kids, they hurt themselves, they threaten. That's absolutely extreme behavior. But at the other end of the spectrum, there are kids who just need a lot of help with redirection. They can't focus, they can't follow directions, they're easily distracted. You need to redirect them, you need to maybe repeat instructions. It's not violent behavior and it's not malicious, it's just a lot of kids with ADHD have this challenge. They just can't focus. Well, it's not violent behavior, and it's not risky behavior as far as somebody else is going to be hurt, but it is unacceptable behavior in a public school environment, in a school environment, okay? We want children to focus. We want children to stay on task. We want children to follow directions, and they have to do that. And believe me, the earlier they learn to do that, the easier it's going to be down the line. So if we've got a first or second grader who is having a really hard time focusing, I want someone from the school to intervene, to collect data on that child's behavior. Why is he off task? How often is he off task? What causes him to be off task? What causes him to have a meltdown? You want the school to collect information and figure out why that behavior is happening, so that then they can come up with a plan to help that child, okay, to help them be successful. We also have here social skills. Some children have difficulty with social skills. Sometimes a lot of children with autism don't understand humor. They don't understand how kids talk to one another at an appropriate age level. They may say something that they think is funny, but it's really not funny. So they're clumsy. They just don't quite know the social skills and how to get along with their peers. School districts are responsible for that. A child's ability to socialize. School districts are responsible for that. So if your child has weaknesses in any of these areas, and it's not addressed on the IEP, then that is absolutely something that should be discussed with the school district, with your IEP meeting, because it very well may be that your child does qualify for services. I can't tell you how often we work with clients that have IEPs, that come to us with IEPs, and we ask, well, how about this? Or how about this skill? And did the school ever address this? And they're like, no, this has been a problem, but they never told us that they could help. Okay. Independent functioning. So independent functioning are services to encourage independence. Instruction in independent functioning skills includes potty training. So at the youngest levels, we're talking potty training. Public school system has to accept any student into the school, including those that are not potty trained. And the school district, I think they've gotten away somewhat from potty training kids, but that absolutely is something that they can be responsible for doing. I remember when I started advocating many years ago, I had a family who had 3 boys, triplets, and all of them had autism. And I remember being in an IEP meeting. It was an all-day event. And we were writing potty training plans for each little boy, because each one was different. Each had a different motivator. Each had a different reinforcer. One liked, the corner of a Cheez-It cracker. Another one was motivated by a sticker. So school districts can absolutely do that. Learning how to use a planner. So kids, they need to learn how to use a checklist at the very basic level. They need to know that if there's something on a piece of paper and you can put a big square by it, and when they're done and they've done, put the backpack on the hook, they can mark an X in that box, or a check mark that says, yes, I did that. That's the most fundamental, basic skill of learning organization. And maybe to begin with, you only have 3 items or 2 items on the checklist. But when a child gets to middle school, they're on their own, and they're going to need skills in organization and how to organize their day, how to organize their materials. Okay, that skill does not start in 5th grade. That skill starts now in 1st grade or 2nd grade. So if your child is very disorganized, can't follow a list, maybe would do better. Some kids really do better with a picture schedule. Whatever it is, this is the area that it can be dealt with. Organizing homework is another area of independent functioning. So if your child doesn't know how to use a planner, doesn't know how to prioritize homework, doesn't turn homework in, forgets to turn it in. If your child doesn't know how to take a big project and break it down into smaller pieces, this is the area where you would deal with that. Okay? Personal assistance or supervision in activities of living, self-care, and self-management. Some kids are more impaired than others, and they need, they need more supervision for personal safety. And you can have on the IEP that a child needs continuous supervision for personal safety. So if your child elopes, even if they just wander off because they see something bright and shiny and they get distracted, or they'll end. One mom I was talking with, her child always ended up in another line of kids for a different classroom. He would be in the hallway, and when the 2 classes would pass one another, her kid always got in the other line and ended up in the other classroom. Okay, so things like that are things that need to be addressed. Okay, all of that needs to be addressed and can be addressed. Healthcare services. So this has to do with mostly nursing services, where a nurse has to intervene and provide, care for children. It might be an EpiPen, it might be seizures, it might be medication, it might be, some kids are very involved and they're on a trach and they have a lot of healthcare needs, but that falls under healthcare services. Communication. This addresses services provided to the student in the areas of receptive and expressive use of language as compared to same-age peers. So receptive language is How does the student understand what is said to him? How does he react when people tell him to do something? Can the student do multi-step directions? You know, David, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, get in your pajamas and throw the clothes in the hamper. Or Mary, open your book, go to chapter 3, page 2, and read the next paragraph. Can your child understand what's being said to him or her? Can they follow those directions? And is that communication that they're receiving clear to them? It's also expressive, how they express themselves to other people, how they get their thoughts out, how they communicate their thoughts. Are they clear when they're trying to explain something to somebody? Does the other person understand them? Is this child able to express their needs and wants clearly? When they do, does the other person understand them? So that's what communication has to deal with. And just as a side note, there's a piece of communication called pragmatics, and pragmatics is social skills. It's communication in social areas with peers. And so, for example, here's how I learned to understand pragmatics. If a student's in a speech therapy class, and you say to the student, okay, Jim, if you're going to a party and your mom dropped you off at a party at your best friend's house, and you went up to the door and you walked in the front door and you saw a bunch of kids in the house, what would you do? And this is what the therapist asks the child, right? And Jim says, well, I would go and I'd say hello to my friends and I'd start talking to them. And that's a good answer. That's a good answer. However, in reality, if we drop Jim off truly at his friend's house and he got in the door, he wouldn't do any of that. He'd probably go sit in a corner or in another room and hide because he doesn't have the ability to strike up a conversation with somebody, whether he knows or doesn't know. So pragmatics is social communication. It's what the child is able to do when they're interacting with their peers. So number 2, if your child has an IEP or a 504 plan, find it, read it, highlight it, okay? Please, you have to become familiar with it. If you don't have a copy, ask the school for a copy. In this day of virtual meetings, one of my greatest concerns is that parents aren't getting copies of their IEPs. And because when you were in a physical meeting, it's real easy. The staffing specialist goes out and makes copies of the IEP in the meeting notes. She comes back, she distributes a copy to everybody, and everybody has their meeting notes. And the parent leaves you leave with your notes, okay? That's not happening in these virtual meetings. You need to stay on top of your IEP. I am running across a lot of parents who don't have copies of their children's IEP. You must have a copy of your child's IEP. If you've had a meeting and you don't have a copy, then you call that school up, and I'd be calling every day until they sent me a copy of my child's IEP. Once that IEP meeting is over and they've gotten all the signatures that they need and they've made copies, they can get you a copy. We're not talking several weeks worth, we're talking a couple of days. And it's really critically important that you get that IEP. So find it, please find it, and read it. Read through it. Know what your child's services are. If your child's not getting the services, then you need to talk to the school about that. Excuse me, you need to talk to the school about that. Highlight it, get a highlighter and highlight all those things. Maybe you have questions about something. Maybe you say, oh my gosh, I forget that. Yeah, the counselor was supposed to be meeting with him 30 minutes every week and she's not doing that. Well, then you better email the principal, send a letter to the principal saying, hey, on my child's IEP, it says that he's supposed to be getting counseling once a week for 30 minutes and he's not. What are we going to do about it? So it's really important. Do not assume that your child's teacher gets a copy of the IEP. Don't assume that they've been passed out, particularly now when it's so disjointed. Some teachers are in the physical building, some of them aren't. You email a copy of your child's IEP to every single teacher if you're doing online learning. You email a copy to every single teacher if your child's doing face-to-face. Don't assume that they've gotten it. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard from teachers, parents who have said to me, teachers would say, "Oh, he has an IEP? Well, we didn't know that." So it's your responsibility to make sure the teachers get the IEP. So when you get your IEP, you want to make a copy for your teachers and personally give it or email to them. And this is whether you're doing online distance learning or face-to-face. Do not assume the school has given a copy to the teacher or therapist. That's the other thing. Your therapist need a copy of the IEP. If your child gets therapy, make sure that your therapist get a copy of the IEP as well. And don't assume the teacher or therapist has read it. Just because they got it doesn't mean they read it. So you need to engage them, and you need to say to them, you need to schedule a 15-minute call or a 15-minute meeting with them and say, we need to go over the IEP. And you need to say, do you see this goal? Do you think this goal is still appropriate for my son? Would you change this goal in any way? Or how are you going to work on this goal? Can you tell me some of the things and strategies you're going to use to work on this goal? Ask them pointed questions about the goals and about the services. You can say, look, you're supposed to be working with him 3 times a week for 30 minutes, but you're only working with him twice a week for 20 minutes. What's that about? How are you going to make up that time? He needs 30 minutes 3 times a week, not 20 minutes twice a week. You need to address these things with your child's teaching and therapy staff. Now more than ever, you keeping data is critically important for the IEP and 504 plan. So we talked earlier about getting a notebook, okay? The second thing, get an empty box. Like the ideal box is the box that copy paper comes in, right? Because it's a nice, sturdy box, not too big. Save your child's work samples. Just throw them in the box. So when your child gets done working on something and he's turned it in and he brings it home or he's done with it, throw it in the box. Just put it in the box. If your child brings papers home that have to do with his IEP or has to do with work production or whatever, throw it in the box. You don't have to necessarily deal with it right then and there, but at least you have it. And so if you do need it, you know where to find it. Work samples are very important. I have been in meetings where we have talked about occupational therapy, and the therapist would say, "Oh, he's doing so well with writing. His letter formation is just incredible, and he's improved so much." Excuse me. A mom pulled out work samples. I'll never forget this. And she pulled out a work sample from the beginning of the school year, and she pulled out work samples from the end of the school year, and they looked the same. You couldn't tell if there was any kind of improvement. So you want to save work samples. Take picture of your child's work. You got the camera. Everybody takes pictures of everything. Take pictures of your child's work. Take videos of your child struggling. I was in an IEP meeting with a mom who was at home. We were doing virtual meetings, and she was at home, and we were having a meeting for her daughter, young daughter who has autism. And during the meeting, the mom all of a sudden says, "Wait a minute." And she goes, and with her phone, it must have been her phone. She was taking videos of her daughter so we could see them. And she was saying to us, "This is how my daughter, if I'm not sitting next to my daughter for school, this is how she acts." And she videoed her daughter, and her daughter was all over the place. I mean, wasn't focused at all, couldn't focus at all. Mom tried redirecting her. The child wouldn't redirect, wouldn't pay attention to mom. Mom would try and give her something to
keep her occupied, give her something to do. The child wouldn't pay attention. And mom said, this is what it's like teaching my daughter. That video changed the whole tone of the meeting, the whole tone of the meeting. And when the school tried to minimize the impact, the amount of help that child needed, I was able to go back to that video and reference that video that mom said and said, are you kidding? You saw her. We all saw her. She doesn't take direction. She won't focus. She can't stay on task independently at all. So it really was helpful. So take pictures of your child's work. Take videos of your child struggling. Be careful, though, too. You have to use common sense. Let me tell you about videos and being on the computer and everything like that. When you take a video, you open up your home to whoever sees that video. And you want to make sure that in the background, who's ever going to see, if you're filming your child at the computer, you want to make sure that the background in your home is nice and tidy and clean and free of clothes or free of toys, free of paper stacked in piles. You want to make sure that who's ever looking at your child on video is seeing a very neat, organized background. So even if they're in the corner of your dining room, and it is the only neat place in your house, okay, because you've cleared everything out. There's nothing on the walls. It's very clean. All extraneous papers are moved. All toys are moved out. Then that's where your child sits, and that's where he does school. Because people make notes of what they see in the background. And look, some of us, it's all we can do to pick up clothes. It's all we can do to pick up extraneous papers and keep a neat house all the time. Sometimes it's all we can do to get up in the morning and breathe, right? So it's really hard. And I know it's hard, but don't give people the opportunity to make judgments about your lifestyle or judgments about how you care for your child. Don't give them that opportunity. Make sure whatever anybody is seeing online is nice and neat and presentable. Make sure your children are nice and neat and presentable. Get them dressed in school clothes to go to school. Don't put them in front of the video in their pajamas, okay? Look, public school personnel, and I'm not saying it's just public school personnel, private schools as well, but I'm dealing with public schools. They make judgments. We all make judgments when we see people. I mean, that's just how we are. We're human beings. We make judgments based on what we see. And those judgments lead to assumptions. And those assumptions can lead to erroneous judgment calls. And those assumptions can lead to rumors. And, because, hey, a teacher could be teaching your child and there's a lot of dirty clothes on the floor or a lot of toys and on the desk. And let me just tell you, I could absolutely see some teachers talking with their peers saying, oh, you should have seen this so-and-so. Oh, my gosh, the junk that was sitting on that table. I don't even know how that child could even focus because there were so many things on that dining room table that was so distracting. And maybe that's part of his problem. Maybe the mom just needs to focus a little bit better and clean up, whatever. It can happen. Take steps now to prevent it from happening. When is the teacher there? When is she not? Keep a schedule. Keep a schedule. When does she show up? I mean, I'm hearing stories of teachers just all of a sudden not showing up for a class. They just don't show up. And let me tell you, this online platform allows for a lot of finagling when it comes to scheduling and teaching. Not everybody, but some. So you need to document. Today the teacher was there from 10 to 10:30 for ELA, or the teacher was not there, or we were there, but she wasn't, or we were ready to join, but she didn't send us the link, or whatever the situation is. If therapy and or an ESE service is not provided as written on the IEP, write it down. So if you're supposed to get speech language therapy twice a week and you're not, write it down. We have one student in May of last year. One of my advocates did a phenomenal job for a student, and he was getting 45 minutes a week of reading help. Okay, 45 minutes a week. This was last school year. Well, in May, they had an IEP meeting, and he wasn't making progress. He wasn't at all. I mean, you just couldn't tell he was making progress at all. Well, she went in there, and she was able to get him 45 minutes a week to 45 minutes a day of reading intervention. I mean, it was amazing. So parents were all happy and everything. Well, we started this school year. Do you know that child has not received 1 minute of reading intervention? 45 minutes a day, he hasn't received 1 minute of it, but it's on the IEP. It's on the IEP. So what do? Well, we're going to file a state complaint and ask the district to provide compensatory services for all that time that they didn't provide that support. So it's really important that you document all of this. If they show up, if they don't show up, if they provide the service, if they don't provide the service. If there's a problem, document the problem. And don't wait, okay? Email the teacher. That day, email the teacher. I mean, this is the beauty of communication. Get on your phone, email the teacher and say, he's not doing this. He's not able to focus. He's not able to follow what you're teaching. She's having a really hard time understanding your instructions. Tell the teacher. What you want to do is document everything, because then when you have an IEP meeting and you're saying that we have problems and you're trying to get better services for your child, better help, you'll have the documentation. They will not. They are very poor most of the time, not all of them, but most of the time, most school personnel are really not good, not good at collecting data and documentation. So you need to document. Send an email to the teacher. If you send an email to the teacher twice a day, because first your child was struggling in ELA and then she's struggling in, I don't know, math, then send the email, send 2 of them a day. Email the staffing specialist. So, that's the person who's generally in charge of IEPs for your school. You can email them. Email the therapist if there's a problem with the therapist. Always copy the principal. Always copy the principal. The principal's in charge of the school. And ultimately, he or she is the one who's responsible for making sure that her staff is doing what they're supposed to do. So I always like to email the principal. It shows that you're holding the other person accountable by emailing their supervisor, in this case, the principal, and then the principal can't say, well, she never knew about it. Send a weekly summary. You can summarize at the end of the week all the activities that happened or didn't happen that you had problems with, and what your concerns are. You can send that, and keep all emails sent and received. Just keep everything, because when I get complicated cases or cases where parents are saying the child didn't receive any support or whatever, and they've tried to communicate with the school, but it still didn't work, those emails can be incredibly invaluable. So is the school not going well? Well, then schedule an IEP 504 plan meeting without delay. You have the right as a parent to have an IEP meeting as often as you want. If you think that it's necessary, well, when my daughter, I'll give you an example. When my daughter was in kindergarten, I felt it was important to have an IEP meeting at the end of every quarter, because I wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to know if they were reaching their goals, if she was reaching her goals. I wanted to know if the goals were still appropriate. I wanted to know if they had any challenges that I didn't know about. I wanted to know. And that was kind of my way as being somewhat of a control freak, that was my way of being able to stay involved in the process and communicate with everybody and know what was going on. So I had an IEP meeting every 9 weeks at the end of the grading period, and everybody knew it. You may not want to do it that often, but if you need to, then you need to have one. I was just talking to a mom who had an IEP meeting 4 weeks ago, and she said, "Oh, I just had my IEP meeting." She said, "Now I have to wait until next year." And I said, "No, you do not." I said, "You can absolutely schedule an IEP meeting. You don't have to wait for that annual review date." So one of the leading enemies in working with the public school system is time. It takes so long to get things done. You have to move, and you have to move now, because days, I get it. You don't want to be the problem parent. You don't want to be the complainer or the whiner. You don't want to be the one that nobody likes. And you just really want to have a peaceful, happy life with the school system, or a happy relationship where the teachers teach your child and your child learns and everything is happy, okay? Well, that just doesn't happen all the time. And when it doesn't happen, you need to act, because you may say to yourself, "You know what, I'm just going to give us some more time. I'll give it a few more days." And then you say, "You know what, I'm just going to try a few more weeks, and then I'll say something." And then those weeks turn into months, and those months turn into more months, and they turn into years. And pretty soon your first grader is in 8th grade, and you're calling me because he can't read. Or you're calling me because he can't do math, or because he has meltdowns because he has poor social skills. And believe me, it happens all the time. Make it happen, okay? Time is your worst enemy. Don't waste it. By the time you write the letter to the principal requesting an IEP meeting, all your requests for IEP meetings should go to the principal, not the teacher. Your teacher just doesn't have any control over anything outside of her classroom. All right. So you don't want to send it to the staffing specialist, because they're not in charge. They're not an authority figure. You want to send it to the principal. So you send your request for an IEP meeting to the principal, explain that you want to have a meeting, explain what you want to talk about, and ask for a meeting date. Okay. By the time they get back to you with the meeting date and you go back and forth scheduling, then, it takes time to get a meeting on the books. By the way, over the years, it's the school districts have developed in the interest of time efficiency, that they tend to tell you as a parent that they only do meetings at this school every other Friday, okay, from 8 to 12. And so if you can't fit your schedule to go into the school or have a virtual meeting every other Friday from 8 to 12, then they may schedule you a meeting 3 months out. I know that's happened with a couple of our parents before we got involved, that they had meetings scheduled 3 months out. That is unacceptable. IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Rights, says that the parents have the right to have meaningful input into their child's IEP. That is very important under that law, that parents are involved in their child's IEP meeting, and that the school schedules IEP meetings without delay. The school needs to work with you to schedule a meeting. They cannot set parameters that are so difficult to meet that that's nearly impossible to have a meeting, okay? So know that as well. Another thing too, you always want to put your request for an IEP meeting in writing. Don't, shout it out at the car line, as you're hanging out the window, talking to the principal as you're getting your kid in the line, and you're saying, "Oh, by the way, I need an IEP meeting." Don't do that, because they're not going to remember. I remember talking to a principal about that. He's like, "Oh, could you please tell your parents that not to yell things out at me during car line, because I'm never going to remember it." So be aware of that. Here's the other reality of time. Oh, this is what I was telling you about. Your child starts out as a cute little thing, and then they're in school, and then they're, an older child in school, and then it's graduation. It comes up really, really fast, and you don't want to waste any time. Oh, one thing I do, so I want to tell you, if you have a child in 4th grade, that child needs to start being prepared for 6th grade. I used to say that all children in 5th grade need to start being prepared for 6th grade, and I've changed that. It's really 4th grade, because the transition into middle school is so big, so significant, that most children aren't ready for it. And so you need to, if your child has an IEP, you need to look at things like computer skills. Is your child able to use a keyboard? If your child can't use a keyboard, and when they're in 4th grade, get them online. There are gobs of free typing tutor programs. Get your child to start learning how to type, because you don't learn to type overnight, the summer. You don't learn to type the summer before 6th grade. Okay, you have to start learning how to type a couple years earlier, and develop that skill. If your child doesn't know how to use a planner, doesn't know how to track homework, then you need to have that as a goal on the IEP. If your child has really poor social skills, is kind of clueless as to what's happening with his peers and everything like that, and he needs social skills help, get him the social skills help. It takes time to develop these skills, and you just don't want to waste the time. I think school districts do a disservice to most kids, and they think like when they get into 6th grade, oh, they're going to have a computer class, and he's going to learn how to do such and such program. Well, why put the child through that? I had a student, we worked, he went to 6th grade, so 5th grade, and the beginning of 5th grade, we developed the IEP, so that whole staff was working with him to develop the skills that he needed for middle school. He had an occupational therapist working with him, teaching him computer programs, the schools, the school district's computer programs, so that he knew how to use them before he went into 6th grade. So that when he was sitting in a desk in a 6th grade classroom, and the teachers told him to access whatever, Google Docs or whatever it was, he knew exactly what it was. He wasn't sitting there trying to figure out what it was. And we had goals specific. I remember having a brainstorming session about, okay, what is he going to need to know going into 6th grade? And we developed a really strong IEP for that reason. So you always have to be thinking ahead. Always have to be thinking ahead. Number 6, write a letter requesting an IEP meeting. Don't wait. Okay. Request an IEP meeting as often as you feel is necessary. Put your request in writing to the principal. We talked about that. You can send it via email, which is fine and acceptable. But I always say follow up with a hard copy. You can print a hard copy and put it in a sealed envelope and deliver it to the front desk. Some parents like to send it certified mail to make sure that they've received it. You can absolutely do that. I was talking to a gentleman one time who ran the computers, the software, was in charge of the computers for a public school district, and he said, you have no idea how challenging it is, how many safeguards we have on software, because they're dealing with kids and they're vulnerable. He says we have all kinds of safety software and email software. So his point was it can be really hard sometimes. It wouldn't be impossible that somebody may not get an email. So to be sure, I give them a hard copy. Ask for enough time to be allotted for the meeting. Oh gosh, I got a call from one of my advocates yesterday, and she said, Pam, she said, Mom's got an IEP meeting and they're giving her 30 minutes for an IEP meeting. What do we do? I said, well, you can't do anything in 30 minutes. I mean, you can't even get through, in my meetings, you can't even get through introductions in 30 minutes. What do we do 30 minutes? You can't accomplish anything. So we told Mom either to see if the school could extend the time. So we needed at least an hour, preferably an hour and a half, or we would reschedule the meeting, okay? 30 minutes, look, if you have a quick issue and it can be decided in 30 minutes, that's fine. But most of the time, there are no IEP issues that can be solved and discussed and documented and rewritten in 30 minutes. So when you send a letter, an email to the principal requesting a meeting, make sure you ask for enough time. If you need 2 hours, we always request 2 hours. We always go to a meeting, we request 2 hours. I don't request anything less, because by the time we're very thorough, we ask a lot of questions. We like to make sure everything's documented. We need 2 hours. So make sure you ask for the time, enough time. Bring someone with you for moral support. Don't go into a meeting by yourself. Just don't. They're overwhelming. As a parent, I remember my very first IEP meeting for my daughter. Oh, that was 24 years ago. Oh my God. I physically remember, like, this really happened. Like, I left my body. I was so overwhelmed. I didn't understand the terms. They're talking about all this stuff that I didn't understand. Thank gosh I took an advocate with me, and she was amazing. And she stepped in and took care of everything until I could come back to earth. It was really difficult. Take somebody with you. Take your mother. Take your girlfriend, even they may not know, or, they may not know anything about IEPs, but at least they can sit there with you and give you their opinion when the meeting is over. You can also invite knowledgeable people. So if you want to invite your private therapist, your child's private therapist, or a tutor, you can invite those people to the meeting as well. Ask for documentation on progress of goals on the IEP. This is probably one of the worst areas where public school districts fail, is in collecting data on IEP goals and progress, and if progress is made or not. You as a parent have the right to have the data, and you need to ask for it. If they don't have it, then you need to make sure it's noted in the meeting notes that there is no data. And so you can say to them, put in the meeting notes that the school doesn't have any data on reading progress or math progress, okay? And then assess progress and make changes if necessary. You cannot write, I don't know how to write an appropriate IEP goal. I don't know how to improve a goal. I don't know how to assess if a goal is working or not if there isn't data. And a couple of years ago, a very, very significant legal case was ruled on by the Supreme Court that said that data is absolutely necessary. Data collection is necessary in IEPs. Number 7, school districts are still obligated to do evaluations, even though COVID's happening and even though everything's kind of topsy-turvy. School districts are still obligated to do evaluations. Some of the evaluations that school districts can do is they can do a comprehensive psychoeducational evaluation, and that includes looking at the cognitive skill, the child's IQ score, their academic and processing. You can ask a school district to do an occupational physical therapy eval, or a speech language therapy evaluation. School districts can do functional behavior assessment, and a functional behavior assessment is a process of collecting data on a specific behavior or a couple of behaviors that a child is exhibiting in the school setting, and collecting data as to when that happens, when that behavior happens, why it happens, what caused it to happen, what happened after it occurred. A whole bunch of data that can be collected, and then a behavior plan written from that. Auditory processing this is a great evaluation. If you think your child is having difficulty following multi-task directions, and this is like, David, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, change into your pajamas, and throw your clothes in the hamper, and you send David off to the bathroom, and 20 minutes later he's in the bathroom and hasn't done anything. Okay, that may be a child who has difficulty following multi-step directions. And an auditory processing evaluation is something that the school district can do at no cost to you, and it assesses whether or not how auditory processing is not it does include a hearing piece. as to how the ears hear sound, but auditory processing has to deal with how the brain processes the sound that comes in, how it processes that information. Like the brain would ultimately, ideally be happy with sound coming in both ears at the same frequency, uniformly in both ears, but that doesn't always happen. I'll give you an example. The first time I ever requested an auditory processing evaluation, and I had a fight for it, was for a student in 5th grade. And when the results came back, it was determined that he had a 68% hearing deficit in one ear. 68%. So from that point forward, every time he was sitting in front of the teacher, he had to sit with his left ear towards the teacher because that was the ear that he could hear in. Completely changed his scores, completely changed all his grades. It was life-changing. So you cannot determine properly, this is my research from talking to audiologists, you cannot properly determine if a child truly has an auditory processing disorder by doing a screening. Okay, which is what the school does, but it's not the same. Okay, assistive technology. Does your child need a laptop? Does your child need help with a speaking device? Does your child need help with using technology for organization or test taking, whatever it is? So the school can do an assistive technology evaluation to make sure, maybe the child needs special software. They can do an assistive technology evaluation to determine that. Number 8, don't give up your child's rights because of a temporary situation. Be careful about signing new and different documents being presented to you by the district. Be wary and be cautious. So here's the thing. Some school districts are, how do I put this? Some school districts are rewriting IEPs and removing services altogether because of the COVID situation. So what they're saying is, so a child would have had an IEP written for a brick and mortar school and face-to-face, and now the child's going to be was going to be home doing online learning. So the school would come in and say, well, we're not going to provide any of these. We're going to take all these services off, and all these accommodations we're going to change because he's not at school anymore, so we can't provide that. So we're not going to provide it, so we're going to take it off. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is a temporary situation. COVID will, we'll move past COVID one way or another. But you do not want to gut the IEP because your child is doing online learning or distance learning. Okay, you want those services should stay on the child's IEP so that when we go back to face-to-face and your child goes back to brick and mortar, then you go back to those services and the goals and everything should still be in place. So don't allow the district to remove services from your IEP or 504 plan because your child is doing distance learning. Don't gut the IEP, amend it. So when school returns to normal, the IEP can revert back to the way it was. What you really want to do is add an amendment to the IEP saying, everything on the rest of the IEP stays the same, but given the current situation with COVID and the learning style that my child's going to be using, we are making these amendments, these changes to the IEP, but we're not dismissing everything else. Another thing is, don't sign, some districts are asking parents to sign additional documents. It's like if there's an emergency. Some districts are presenting families with parents with a document that they want parents to sign so that in the event of an emergency, your child will get at the minimum these services. Don't sign anything like that, okay, until you've really reviewed it, because you don't want to be giving up your rights. You have a lot of rights under IDEA, and you don't want to give any of those up. So if the school asks you to sign anything like that, I would be very, very wary before I signed it, and I would have somebody review it and give you some input on it. Number 9, make sure the IEP 504 plan properly reflects the accommodations and services your child needs during COVID. So what services or extra help from a teacher does he need in what areas? What equipment? There are things with distance learning that the child may need that he didn't need in a brick and mortar setting. Maybe he needs a certain kind of computer program, software. Maybe he needs, like I have here, a special chair, special software. Does he need an extra break? Does he need paper pencil testing? Whatever he needs to be successful at home, because it's a completely different educational setting, those things need to be documented on the IEP, so that in whatever the school district needs to do to help your child with those circumstances, they need to be accountable for. Oh, number 10, show kindness and gratitude and say thank you. Sometimes we forget to do this. Everybody's stressed. Everybody is like hanging by a thread and on their last nerve. And it's not easy in the school district either. It's not easy. A lot of teachers have not received clear direction from their districts. They've just kind of been shoved out there and told to do their best. So when you can and when it's appropriate and when it's been earned, it's nice to say thank you. It's nice to, send a note, a handwritten thank you note, or send an email and just say thank you for your time. I really appreciate your help. I'll never forget when Catherine was in transitioning to kindergarten, and I had my first IEP meeting to get her into kindergarten. This was 24 years ago. Wow. And we had a meeting and everybody was there, and it was lots of people. And after the meeting was over, I wrote a thank you note to everybody in that meeting, every therapist, speech, she had them all, speech and language, OT, PT, she had them all. And so there's a lot of people. I sent a little handwritten thank you note to every one of those people. I will never forget the response that I got. I walked into the school, into my daughter's classroom like a week later, and because I put them all in envelopes and I mailed them to the school and everything. And the teacher came up to me and she said, "You have no idea how much those thank you notes had an impact on all of us." And I was kind of taken aback. I thought, it's just a thank you note. She said, "I have never received a written thank you note from a parent before, ever." And I just couldn't believe it. She says, "It's true." She said the therapists were coming up to her, holding the note in their hand. And they said, "Can you believe this? I've never received anything like this." And not only did mom send it she didn't send it just to the teacher, they were saying, she sent it to everyone. I never forgot that. I just never forgot that. I also work with a lot of teachers who come to work for me as an advocate after they leave the public school system. It's not a happy place to be. It really is not a happy place to be. And one teacher, I complimented a teacher one time. I was on the phone with her and I said, "You did a fabulous job." I said, "Your skills are amazing." And I said, "You should just know that I really think you're extremely good at what you do." And on the other hand, I heard silence. And then I heard, and I said to her, "Are you okay?" And she was crying. And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." I said, "What did I say? I'm so sorry." I couldn't figure out. I insulted her or something. And she says, No. She said, in 25 years of working in the public school district, no one's ever complimented me like that. I never received a compliment from my supervisor. You're the first one who's ever complimented me." And that didn't happen once. It's happened to several people. I cannot tell you how difficult it is for some of these people to work in the public school district. So whenever you can show kindness and gratitude and say thank you, it's always appreciated. It's always a good thing to do. Okay, so I think we're ready now to take questions, and this is who we are. This is what we do. We attend meetings, we help families, we help improve IEPs, get more services. I can't guarantee 45 minutes every day for reading. Please don't call me saying that that's what you want. But we do improve IEPs and we get kids qualified for IEPs. We file state complaints. We handle due process cases. So if you need help or know someone who does, we're here for you. So are you there ready to answer questions?
I'm back. Thank you so
To read
much.
the questions, I'll answer.
It was a really, really interesting presentation from my perspective. That we don't really have any questions
Thank
from
you.
the crowd at this time, but I have a question for you, and I don't know if this is something you're going to cover next week or not. But how does an IEP affect like the McKay Scholarship or the Gardner Scholarship, especially compared to a 504 plan?
Sure. So the Gardner Scholarship and the McKay Scholarship are two distinct scholarships. McKay Scholarship, a child who has a 504 plan can qualify for a McKay Scholarship, as well as a child who has an IEP can qualify for a McKay Scholarship. The difference is that if you have a 504 plan, there is only one funding level for a 504 plan. Whereas with an IEP, there are 5 funding levels that a child could qualify for, depending on the amount of services and the type of services that they have in their IEP. So the funding level for a McKay Scholarship can go anywhere from about $6,000 up to about, I think it's like $21,000, $23,000 right now. And those are for children who have a lot of intensive needs. But it all depends on the services written on an IEP. So that's the McKay Scholarship. And the McKay Scholarship can only be used to either put your child in a private school and help defray the cost of the tuition at a private school, because the state, let's say your scholarship amount is $6,000. The state will send $6,000 to the private school in order to help defray the cost of tuition, and then you would have to pay the balance. Or the other thing with the McKay Scholarship is that you can elect to put your child in a different public school. But you have to remember is that there's no guarantee that your child will go into the school you want them to go into, because the district has the ability to refuse your request to put your child in a specific public school if that public school is full and they can't accept any more children. So the district has some power in that way. And again, the 504 has one basic funding level. The Gardner Scholarship is different because it's not based on an IEP. It is based on a medical diagnosis. So a child has to have a certain specific medical diagnosis, and they're outlined in the state law, like cerebral palsy, Prader-Willi syndrome, Down syndrome, autism, or your child has to have a rare genetic condition. And it's all outlined. If you go to the Florida Department of Education website, if you Google FLDOE, and put Gardner Scholarship, it'll pop up. You can find the rules and the regs for it. So it's based on a medical diagnosis. The base amount of the scholarship for Gardner is about $10,000. Now that amount there is a way to try and increase that amount for the Gardner Scholarship. You have to work with the public school system and get an IEP written and updated and all this kind of thing, but there is a way to do it. So in the Gardner Scholarship, you as a parent can control how the money is spent. You can use it, like if you're homeschooling the child, you can use it to pay for school supplies. You can use it for tuition at a private school, but you can use it for therapies, behavior therapy. You can, use it to pay for a lot of things. And that's all outlined on the website as well.
Great. Well, what can you give us a little preview of what's in store next week?
So next week, we're going to be talking about behavior. We're going to be talking about strategies in IEP meetings and a little more advanced concepts. Those are two of the main things. unless you can think of something else you want me to add, I do have a whole bunch of stuff. Behavior, IEP meeting strategies, how to get things on an IEP, it's things that school districts are obligated to have and obligated to do that most parents don't realize. So there's a lot of good practical information to be shared.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to having you back, and thank you so much again for coming tonight, and thank you to our audience, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.